April 19th, 1 year later. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jennifer Reynolds.
And I'm Kelly Ogle. Tonight, we remember what happened to all of us a year ago.
This hour is dedicated to those who lost their lives last April and to those who found life through random acts of fate or deliberate acts of heroism.
It's not for the suspects. You won't see them here tonight, and you won't see graphic pictures from that first morning.
Tonight, we look at where we have come since that terrible day a year ago and where we're going. We'll meet the people whose images have haunted us this last 12 months and hear their stories.
And we'll introduce you to the eyes and ears of our newsroom, the dedicated professionals who captured these moments of terror and triumph. The photojournalists of Newsline 9.
Wow.
When we first got on board, we didn't have any idea what was going on downtown. I thought it was just like a gas explosion.
Holy cow. About a third of the building has been blown away.
It was kind of scary. I mean, basically what I was seeing was just footage from Beirut or somewhere. I mean, this wasn't here. This wasn't Oklahoma City.
It looks like something you'd see on the evening news in Europe.
So many images from the days and weeks following the bombing will never be forgotten, especially for those who actually captured the moments on videotape.
Well, I fight being emotional at the time because I see it in black and white, but seeing it now, I cry a lot. I see Bailey Yallman's mother, then I see the images of the child. I see the other families that have lost children. I see the cemeteries that I've seen throughout the year.
Photojournalist Larry Lockman captured another memorable image from April 19th, that of a rescue worker holding tight to the little boy he'd just pulled from the rubble. That rescue worker didn't want to let go, and as Newsline 9's Angela Buckaloo tells us, he's still not letting go 1 year later.
Joseph Weber and Chelsea and Katie Hull share more than just a swing. They'll share the rest of their lives.
Best sound in the whole world.
They might not have ever met had the girl's father not saved Joseph's life a year ago. Officer Don Hull dug Joseph out from underneath more than a foot of rubble. Before it was all over, he'd bring out 3 dead adults and 5 dead children. Joseph was the last person he brought out alive.
Found a foot, started working our way slowly up through, and then finally uncovered him.
The anxious man and woman behind Don, Joseph's parents, Dan and Don Weber.
Don and I, we talked about how things were looking worse as minutes ticked by.
But then they saw their little boy, bloodied but breathing.
Sheer terror. I was afraid this child would die. I was afraid of what his parents were seeing.
In fact, it wasn't until late the night of April 19th that Sergeant Hull realized Joseph had lived.
It was just this one little boy that stuck with him that, gosh, you know, if we had just gotten there quicker, if we'd gotten there sooner, if we'd done this, you know, really beating yourself over things you couldn't control. And then to find out he was okay, you know, it's kind of like, okay, you know, we made a difference somewhere.
2 days later, he visited Dan and Don as they waited in the hospital.
This is a full-grown Simba, which means he has to become full-grown.
As you can see, his injuries have healed. His broken arm, blown-out eardrums, and shattered jaw are back in working order. Only a scar on his cheek could tell you this little boy survived the worst terrorist act in the United States.
Very fortunate, very blessed, I think, because as you've seen, I mean, Joseph's very healthy kid, and most of his injuries have healed up 100%, and he's just an ornery 2-year-old kid. Don and his family are definitely close to ours, and even in a way part of our family, I think, now.
You know, our girls were always curious and asking, and you know, I think it's very good for our girls to be able to see Joseph like this instead of the images that they're always seeing. And as you can tell, they're having a blast.
He is a lucky little boy. Don may be his hero, but after seeing unspeakable carnage last April 19th, this little boy is his hero's hero.
I have no idea what it would be like without having that light at the end of the tunnel. I hope the very best for him, and that You know, he has a chance that some of the children will never have.
Little Joseph Weber will soon have company in the family. His parents are expecting a new baby this summer.
One of the images from the bombing that's come to symbolize the urgency of the rescue in the hour immediately after the explosion.
And while most people might not recognize the name Brian Espy, they will forever remember his ordeal.
Up until 9:02, it was just pretty much a normal morning.
On April 19, 1995, Dr. Brian Espy was working on a project in the conference room at the Department of Agriculture inside the federal building. He was only about 35 feet from his own office, but that distance saved his life. That's when his normal morning came crashing down as the building fell in around him.
And then when I pulled myself up from there, I could see daylight where prior to that there'd been walls. And then I started to look around for, any signs of anybody else. And of course, to the west of me, there was nothing. I mean, there was a 5-story drop, and you could see right up to the sky.
The explosion killed 7 employees in his office and left Espy and 2 others stranded on the 5th floor.
He just did a real job of talking me down.
Dr. Espy and the others were rescued a short time later by Oklahoma City firefighters. This image was seen over and over around the world, and it's how Espy's family found out he'd survived the blast. He says it's a miracle he wasn't killed, and that has changed the way he looks at life.
My entire staff of about 7 people is gone.
A lot of the things that probably I was thinking about were important today. I went to work on the 19th, probably weren't all that important. And family and friends are more important. And I hope we always remember that.
And his friends now include the firefighters who rescued him. He visits with them at least once a month. And strangers who saw Espy's rescue have also reached out to him. When it was reported in a Pennsylvania newspaper that Espy lost a favorite Amish coffee mug in the bombing, replacements came flooding in.
Outpouring of kindness, I think that's what I want to remember about the 19th, that Oklahoma, people saw Oklahoma at its best. And I think we set a standard for the rest of the country on how neighbors help neighbors and people do whatever they have to in time of a crisis. I get a feeling that Oklahoma City is a much closer community now than they were before the 19th.
Dr. Espy says the anniversary of the bombing will bring back some difficult memories.
But he says he does plan to commemorate the day in a private ceremony. Tomorrow, he and others from his office who survived will pay tribute to the 7 who did not.
Perhaps the hardest to take for anybody with a little one at home were the images of fear on the faces of children caught up in the violence. Among them, little James and William Green, who were pulled from the Y Daycare Center.
When Randy Renner and I arrived on the scene that day, we stared in disbelief at the activity going on around us. We couldn't believe what was happening. And of the hundreds and hundreds of images that we recorded that day, the one that is etched in my mind most is of a young boy being carried by an EMSA worker. And looking in his face, you couldn't see any emotion, but in his eyes you could sense the fear and the desire to be taken to a safe place. And what really has touched my heart was when the EMSA employee was going to set him down to be treated. His little hand was resting on her shoulder, and it got tighter and tighter and tighter, and he didn't want to let go. And this lesson I've taken to heart, that if you are afraid, if you are in trouble, that it is okay to reach out and hang on, because especially here in Oklahoma, there'll be plenty of people filled with love and compassion that will be there to hold on to you.
Okay, now Ellie, let's go ahead and put this harness on. One arm through there and one through the other side.
For one young woman, the lesson of that moment was not about holding on.
Well, the adrenaline is pumping, and she's a little bit nervous.
It was about letting go.
We've had an explosion. We need help. It's in the fire department.
When the bomb went off, Allie Hatton was 100 feet from ground zero, with her class of 2-year-olds inside the YMCA Daycare Center.
I need EMSA in front of the YMCA. We got several injuries.
I was sitting in the library area reading a story at the time that it happened. And it kind of knocked us away from the wall and stuff was falling down on us.
We need all fire ambulances you can get.
Unaware she was injured herself, Allie's main concern was getting a seriously hurt little boy named James to the hospital with his older brother William.
James, everything's gonna be okay. And I found him, and I made sure that the two went to the hospital together, and that I went to the hospital with them so I could make sure they had a name, so they weren't a John Doe. And then, of course, once we got to the hospital, and I'm seeing it on TV, and I'm already safe, and I could see my coworkers and some children still down there, and that was really tough. There you go.
And so is she.
Okay, I'm watching.
A year later, Allie is still working for the Y.
I've got to be here to be there, be strong for the kids. Come on, climb up the stairs.
But much else about her life has changed.
I'm a doer now. I like to do things and try new things.
Everything's in place. We're ready to go skydive?
Ready.
Let's go do it.
So I decided to go skydiving.
Are you nervous? I am, are you?
It was quite an experience. In fact, I told my instructor it was going to be the second scariest moment in my life.
Step on in, Ellie.
Facing one helped Allie face the other.
They should be coming around any time.
It was a little scary. You're holding on to the plane, and then, of course, you have to let go.
I don't see them anywhere. They may have gone to Dallas instead.
After that moment of letting go, I wasn't afraid. It was very serene, very peaceful. It was like you were flying.
I think it kind of gives her a little perspective in life. If she can handle this, I think she kind of feels like she can handle about anything that comes her way.
All the way.
You have nothing but time.
There you go. What do you think, Ellie?
Oh, that was great.
Good job.
But you never know when it's your time.
We're happy to report tonight that James and William Green are doing fine, and the Y Daycare Center will soon be getting a new permanent home.
On that first day, there was no shortage of sights to break the heart.
And yet in the midst of all that suffering, there was one sight that lifted the spirits of the emergency workers. It was the American flag.
Gan Matthews has the story of firefighters who found it and flew it.
Mark Molman and Mike Walker are hazmat technicians with the Oklahoma City Fire Department. But on April 19th, they labored in search and rescue at the Murrah building. They were looking for survivors on one of the lower floors when Molman found a tattered American flag.
Pretty bad shape. I'd say 50–60% was left of the flag. It was still clear what it was. By no means, was it that destroyed, but it was Old Glory.
Well, he handed it to me at first, and I said, we ought to hang this up. He said, yeah, we ought to.
Using plastic pipe as a pole, Mike Walker hung the flag over the scene. He and Molman meant to send a message.
At that time, we thought maybe it was somebody from a foreign country, maybe the Middle East, getting revenge on the United States. So we wanted to let them know that we were still here.
The flag lifted the spirits of the emergency workers in the early hours of the recovery work. Then it vanished.
I know it was there for a few days, and then it was kind of forgot about, at least by me, and then later on in the week, I turned around and remember glancing back up, and it was gone.
Gone, but not forgotten.
Nothing could have ever prepared the heroes of Oklahoma City for the terrible task they faced.
From firefighters to police officers to housewives, all contributed the best they knew how.
As a pool photographer, I was allowed to go down to the bomb site to give the public a first close look at the devastation and rescue that was going on down there. And I can remember just standing at the bottom of the Alfred P. Murrah building, looking up and seeing this huge crater that enveloped these tiny little rescue workers. And I think for me, it was the first time that you could actually see how much damage, how much devastation this thing caused. But you know, I think the thing that really got me the most were the rescue workers, down on their hands and knees, moving one stone at a time, giving each other a helping hand or a word of comfort. And I think that's what the rescue was all about, people helping other people. There was unity there from the beginning. That spirit continues today.
The Oklahoma City Fire Department has become a national symbol of strength in the past year.
And while it would be impossible to introduce you to every hero, Demi Capral does have the story of one man who led rescuers through the rubble through unspeakable destruction.
I remember thinking after I'd been in there for a couple hours that we're going to be here forever.
Firefighter Mike Shannon led the search through the twisted remains of the Murrah building.
There was just so much to do.
The tangled tunnels of destruction stretched Shannon and his comrades to new emotional and physical levels.
The space was just so small that not very many could get in there. You had to depend on your partner to pull your feet, to pull you out from underneath some things.
288 hours of back-breaking, heart-wrenching work in 16 days. Through it all, Shannon remembers the good things, his fellow firefighters enduring risk of duty.
The friendship, the camaraderie, you know, watch tremendous men do tremendous things. And you got to see it daily.
A year later, Shannon's daily tasks keep him at his desk a lot. A few pictures, his ID badge full of pins, remind him of the tragedy. But the adjustment's been tough. He keeps key souvenirs in a crate. Up until only a few months ago, though, he carried around the Murrah map and victims list. Shannon was in charge of directing rescuers and crossed off names from this list as the victims were found.
It was the guide.
But
How would
the
you want
building
it?
was gone.
Right.
Why were you still carrying it around?
Because it becomes such an important thing. Without it in the building was like going on vacation without a road map.
Shannon says many involved in rescue and recovery still face a tough road ahead as they're uncomfortable being thrust into history.
We didn't do anything behind the fence that we weren't expected to do or what we weren't paid to do.
From all that firefighters were called to do, Shannon says many now appreciate the important things in life, and so do their loved ones.
My wife likes me better after than before.
Before April 19th, Shannon was a big fan of Civil War heroes. Now all he has to do is look around his office to see faces of courage.
A lot of character, a lot of honor, and their outstanding courage, fearlessness.
Mike Shannon says that he and many of his co-workers will carry the memories of their days at the bomb site like scars of war.
There was more to the rescues than firefighters and police. Medical teams from all over the state mobilized to care for the wounded. That made a big and lasting impact on TV9 photojournalist Jim Lipscomb. He was at St. Anthony Hospital soon after disaster struck.
It seems like there was so much focus, and the people that were doing the emergency work, they just seemed to know exactly what they were doing, though there's people coming right and left. No one was getting upset, and we're just pulling together. And it was just everyone was getting these people into the hospital and getting them treated as fast as they could. They seemed so focused and confident in what they were doing.
One of the rescuers wouldn't make it out alive. Nurse Rebecca Anderson was in the prime of her life, 37 years old. Eyewitnesses say she was able to help some victims out of the building before she suffered a severe head injury, possibly from falling debris. Her legacy of giving continues today. Family and friends have established a scholarship in her name. We told you earlier about that American flag found by two firefighters in the Murrah building rubble. It wasn't the only flag found.
There were flags in practically every office on every floor, and the heroes who found them weren't always wearing uniforms.
Gan Matthews has our story.
And we seen the cloud, you know, and Terry and I jumped in my truck.
These men of Allied Steel put in hundreds of hours in the rescue operation. On the second or third day, no one can remember now, some of them found a flag on the 5th floor.
You could tell it had, you know, had been through some disaster. It was torn and it was soiled. But it looked at one time to have been a very expensive, nice flag with gold trim around the border.
Soon the flag was flying from Allied's crane. It was Mike Youngberg who put it there.
This flag means a lot to me, and a lot of other people lost their lives to defend it. You know, and those people are involved in working for the government, and you know, they're defending the flag as well.
After a few days, Allied Steel took the flag down for safekeeping. Then, at the urging of the Oklahoma Historical Society, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms tracked it down.
We felt that it was important that the first flag from the building be preserved for all the citizens of Oklahoma to come and to look at it and to remember.
On April 24th, at the bomb site, the flag was formally presented to Governor and Mrs. Keating by Allied Steel and ATF. It's now on display in the Blue Room at the state capitol, scars and all, preserved for all of us, lest we forget.
The images that were being played out before our camera was almost like a movie. Of course, we knew that it wasn't. It was later found out the largest terrorist attack on our country's soil. So what was our reason to be there? Well, it's pretty simple, really. We had to document history and to let people know, let the world know what hate and anger will do. I believe another image that I'll never forget is that of Rocky Yardley and his son. I mean, how many of us didn't hold our kids just a little bit tighter and appreciate things just a little bit more? Another image that we'll never forget is the president at the Murrah site just a few days ago laying a wreath there. The real story, though, was the kids, the children, the survivors of the bombing. In a way, they symbolize what we're, Oklahoma City in the United States is no matter what you do, we will go on.
Healing has been a longer process than many hoped, but it began before the dust had settled downtown.
Neighbor reached out to neighbor, strangers became friends, and from calamity grew common ground.
We discovered that unity felt good and worked well. A tough lesson learned and one too easily forgotten. We close tonight with a reminder.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
It was about 9 days after the bombing. Everyone was totally worn out. And some members from the Christian Life Missionary Baptist Church came to sing to the rescue workers. And the music was just so powerful. And we had seen acts of kindness before a lot, but for me, this was special. For the first time, for me personally, I felt a sense of hope. It was just singing. It was a simple song, but through the song, we got a sense of joy, a sense of love, and a sense of God. And after it was over, there was so much love spread around. There was hugging and crying and the shaking of hands. It was just something so overwhelming. And for me, that's one moment that I'll just never forget.
It seemed like they had just brought a child in, just an hour or so before my shift change ended, and that was, those were always hard.
Hard for searchers who turned up the tiny bodies, and for the chaplains like Bobby Allstat trying to lend comfort.
One of the chaplains came down and said, Reverend, we need you. They're very low today.
For 9 days, Reverend J.L. Jacobs led a group from his Christian Life Missionary Baptist Church to the bomb site where they sang and offered solace from outside the perimeter fence. On this day, they were finally called inside.
Just and snare.
As I began to walk up, I can remember shedding some tears because God had given his endorsement. And we became God's expression of love. He just moved and worked it that way.
When they got through, they just started hugging everybody, and this little girl came up and was hugging on my leg, and I just bent down and picked her up and just, I don't know, just about lost it. Just holding that precious little child, just a beautiful, little thing. Bless her heart. She doesn't know how much she affected me, just holding her.
Weary from a week of holding up faith against the weight of monumental human suffering, Police Chaplain Jack Post says this simple gesture of song and support was almost too much to bear.
It's really hard for caregivers to receive care
And yet, I think sometimes it's really the point of exhaustion. We let those defenses down, and here came somebody to care for us. And we let it happen, and it became natural, and then it was okay to be cared for.
3 men of God and the community they serve, united by despair, lifted up by faith and hope.
And with the message that with God's love hand in hand, black and white, old, young, we're going to beat this. We can overcome.
And those are the kind of walls that the Lord broke down. I can't help but believe that something happened in a permanent way. God, some kind of way, is going to, he has, and he will bring the good. And we'll understand better by and by.
Sometimes he is hard for me to understand. We pull away from each other so easily, even though we're walking the same road. Yet we will build dividing walls between our brothers and ourselves. But I don't care what label you may wear. If you believe in Jesus, you belong with me. The bond we share is all I care to see. We will change this world forever. You can join with me. Join and sing. You're my brother, you're my sister. Take me by the hand. Together we will work until he comes. There's no foe that can defeat us. We're walking side by side. Oh, if there is love, we will stand. You see, the day will come when we will be as one. And with the mighty voice, together we will proclaim. We will stand. One more time, my brother, your sister. Taking our land. We will. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. There's no home and we are walking side by side.